Good day, good night. Welcome to the Five Rings Podcast. I'm Kevin Laramee, joined by Duane Rollins. The 2022 Beijing Olympic Games are upon us. The ceremony has started, and the flame has been lit. We'll talk about the freaking flame in a minute, because I will not use the C word during these Olympics. This was not a cauldron. This was just a little flame. We'll talk about that later. Duane, how you doing?
I'm doing well. You know, the games are upon us, as you say, because the opening ceremony has happened, which of course is the official opening of an Olympic Games. But I got to tell you, the games are not 17 days long anymore. They are 19 because the 2 days of pre-competition were as full as ever. I had 3 screens going last night at one point, and this is before the opening ceremonies. That's just, let's stop pretending. The Olympics last 2 days longer than they say.
Exactly. So how about you actually do the Olympic ceremony like Tuesday, like last Tuesday, so that you give proper importance to all days, because there might be no medals given, but it's because it can't, because starting tomorrow on Beijing Day, which would be February 5th, there's going to be 6 medal ceremonies in the second full day or first full day of competition. But technically, there was almost a full day of competition before the ceremonies. But Duane, how did you enjoy the beginning of these 2022 games so far?
In terms of the competition, I actually have been pleasantly surprised by how quickly I got over any reservations I had in terms of these games. And there were, we'll get into them a little bit more in terms of the serious stuff in a minute, but just on a personal level, they're coming so quickly up after Tokyo. There still is a pandemic going on. I was distracted, as you were, with World Cup qualifying on the men's side, which of course we've covered closely on our signature show, Soccer Today. So, all of that stuff was taken away from what normally would have been a big hype up for me for these games. I didn't have as much prep time into them and all that. So as soon as I started watching the mixed curling event and women's hockey, which are the main 2 things, and then even figure skating got off the ground yesterday too, it felt real and it felt like an Olympics, and I was enjoying it again. And it was actually kind of relaxing, because as much as it was, there were a lot of stuff going on. It wasn't quite a full day. It's not, especially it's like the fire hose gets turned on with the opening of every Olympics, because it's the weekend day too, right? So
you can drink out of a hose, but have you tried drinking out of a fire hose? They're like, you can't even consume anything, which is basically, I guess, what it is when the real Olympic Games starts. What did you think about, we'll get to Duane's medals for the pregame and the pre-ceremony, and I guess now. But let's talk about the ceremony. Let's talk about the big elephant in the room, the ceremony itself. This is the 5th Olympic ceremony we actually covered together on this show. It's not the 5th one we've seen. I've seen every single one of them since, I guess the ones I remember are starting from 98, really, clearly in my mind. But I do remember, not specifically Atlanta, but I remember watching Atlanta, watching Lillehammer, watching Albertville and Barcelona. But when we think about what opening ceremonies have become over the last decade, this was not it. This was different. This was even subdued, doesn't do it justice. This was, in my opinion, a going through the motion of a bare minimum opening ceremony.
Yeah, and for those that are new to us, Kevin's Olympic memories, as he sort of indicated, go back to probably 92. I think that's probably fair to say. Whereas mine would go back a little bit earlier than that because of our difference in age too. I remember 84 is where I would first start to remember. So that's our comparisons. And when we're talking about opening ceremonies, I would say that the high bar there is always going to be London. And I think that that's a very high bar to ever reach again. I would love to see them do it, but I don't think it's going to be the closing ceremonies of these. But the low bar in that run is always to me is kind of Albertville. Albertville was just weird.
Albertville was weird for a ton of reason. So can you imagine if the Beijing 2022 opening ceremonies did not have maybe the most impressive TV screen I've seen in my life, which I guess was the literal floor of the entire Bird's Nest Stadium. outside that spectacle TV screen, I could say that was the opening ceremonies to me. Like just the display, the literal display.
And the couple fireworks displays were pretty decent too, but not as long as if you remember the closing ceremonies from '08, which are definitely we talked off air, Kevin and I, about that. It's not my taste in terms of artistic stuff. Is not necessarily where you typically see in the sort of stereotypical Asian stuff. Is not typically what I personally gravitate to. Teach their own on that. It's art subjective, of course, but. So I didn't enjoy Beijing as much as maybe others did, but it was certainly big, and the spectacle was massive, and you could appreciate it at that level. As you said, they scaled everything down in this one tonight, and so I would put this much closer to Albertville than London is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
It has to do, as Kevin said, with this what we think was a conscientious decision. It's not just us that are saying this to appear
inclusive, peaceful, to appear as a welcoming place. If the United Nations were to ever organize an opening ceremony, it would look a lot like what we have seen today.
Yeah, they're inclusive, I guess. Yeah, all those sort of buzzwords.
Which is, of course, what China is known for, right? This is literally what China is known.
It rings very hollow because, a big part of this is ignoring the fact there's a boycott, a diplomatic boycott happening from most nations competing in these games because of China's human rights record.
Exactly. You didn't see a whole lot of head of state in the stands. Normally you would. But, of course, there's always the coronavirus right now. I said coronavirus like this was 2000s. COVID times. But of course, we're talking about Taipei, Hong Kong, which was very orchestrated, very choreographed, their entry there, how the TV producers, which is of course locally done, and the images are given to broadcasters here in Canada, CBC or NBC in the United States, do not have the editorial choice of how the actual ceremony from the beginning to the end of the ceremony, how that is done and cut and which shot and where to put the cameras and stuff. They don't have the control, so it is the local TV director, producers especially, and the TV director that would be, okay, cue, Taipei's coming out, okay, well, they would say Taipei, Chinese Taipei, they would not say Taiwan. And you say, cue to President of China, Xi Jinping, okay, cue to Hong Kong, cue to, so it does feel kind of, the message they were going for is so subtle, but you can still see through it, which then makes the whole thing kind of hollow, like you mentioned, Duane. But, we're not going to lie to each other. The last few games outside of maybe Pyeongchang were propaganda-driven. And, at this point, if we all know, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's a duck. Well, assume it. Just be the duck. Show me something spectacular, unfortunately. But that wasn't the case either. So it even rings hollow there. Yeah,
look, this is a topic that is very much front of mind right now, the whole sport washing idea, right? We hear that term get used a lot. If you're new to that term, it basically means exactly what it kind of sort of sounds like, that you use sport to wash over other areas. You see it in the football world on like our other main topic.
Formula One and now even golf. So there's a few different sports market that are being used by states, nations around the world to help diffuse, or not diffuse, it doesn't mean the same, to broadcast, I guess, to help broadcast a message, regardless of that message. Sometimes it's on the right side, sometimes it's on the left side, sometimes it's on a dictatorship side, authoritarian side, sometimes it's the exact opposite. But sport is being used as a medium over the last few decades.
Yeah, look, I'm glad you sort of said it can be from many sides. There's, in this country right now, there is talk of an Olympic bid that would be led by the First Nations populations in British Columbia
for 2030. The Winter Games.
I'm sorry, that's sport washing. Like that, they're trying to use that to politically align with, what from a federal government perspective, because yes, the natives would be the leaders of that, and they would be in the front and center leadership positions, and I think that's a wonderful initiative, actually, but. It absolutely is to try and repair some relationships and some perceptions around the treatment of the Aboriginal people in Canada. That's sport washing in the same way. we don't view it as evil.
Just because it's maybe morally right, we don't view it as the same way. But you're right, it is sport washing, even if it's done for good or for evil. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and look, those that listen to my soccer podcast know that I'm a Manchester City fan, and I do have ethical dilemmas at times with the ownership there. But then I look at some of the work that they've done in poorer areas of the city of Manchester to try and really open up access to sport and community programs and work programs and things like that. They've done legitimate good work in there. Does that change what they've done back home and the human rights abuses that have happened under the folks that own that team? No, of course not. But it's a complicated, nuanced world, and I ultimately, when it comes to stuff like this and Qatar coming up which we'll talk about a lot in November, 6 months leading up, I think it's better to be inclusive than exclusive when it comes to these things. I don't think boycotts work, and I'm very opposed to boycotts. Actually, I think all they do is punish the athletes. They do nothing and they make
and you muffle your message. You literally just silence yourself, basically. But yes,
yeah, exactly. They're performative. Boycotts are performative for people that want to appear that they're doing something without actually doing anything about it, right? Like this today during these opening ceremonies on the CBC, where Kevin and I watched here in Canada, they were talking about Taiwan. They were talking about human rights abuses throughout this. Obviously, the two Michaels here in Canada is a story that you can Google if you don't know that's we all know and understand as being something directly related to us, but it all was being spoken about, and it doesn't necessarily if they don't go. So I don't necessarily agree with that, but it is, it's a bummer that we have to talk about it. And it's a bummer that the Olympics blew up to the size that only authoritative states would bid for them. And hopefully they're learning a lesson there. And I will say this about the Beijing Games, and I didn't put them in my medals that we'll talk about in a moment when we sort of explain our format to new listeners and give our first example of it. They are reusing some venues. The curling venue is they're calling it the Ice Cube now.
What was it called? It was called the Water Cube.
Water Cube, yeah.
Yeah. So Ice Cube. I thought it was an actor. I thought he was an actor. I thought it was like an ice cube. I thought it was just frozen water, but I guess I was wrong.
Yeah, and where the figure skating was last night was also, I think it was where like wrestling and stuff like that was.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. I don't remember the names, but those were big venues. And you're right. The Bird's Nest, the Olympic Stadium, also is the same one as in 2008. It is a recycled games. When you think about it, there's a few aspects of Beijing because of the 2008 Olympics that facilitates these games, and maybe they're the first of the new kind Winter Games. We'll see where that's the reason why they might come back to Vancouver in 2030 also, is to reuse infrastructures that are already existing, keep the cost low, because let's face it, it's not like there's been a stampede of nations and cities wanting to organize Winter Games over the last decade or so. Since we started this show, we went from teams bidding for Olympic Games to now, when nations and countries and cities bidding for Olympic Games, now to basically the IOC looking and yelling at the room, who wants the next ones?
No, precisely. These games in particular kind of harken back to those early days. Like we started five rings in 2014 at Sochi, and we went weekly after that for a couple of years until we moved into daily on the soccer side and had to sort of make some changes so we had time to sleep, right? We talked about the bidding for these games all the time during that. We called them the games no one wanted because just systematically city after city after city kept dropping off because they just are so bloated and so big, and the Winter Games are already at a disadvantage because, well,
you kind of need. Well, you used to need winter. I guess now you kind of need just direct transport to where winter is.
Yeah. Like I was about to say, like Toronto and Montreal, the two cities we're in, in a country that loves the Winter Games, we can't bid for them, right? Because there's no mountains here, and that's the thing.
It's literally the only thing. And trust me, they've tried to do it in Quebec. They even looked in like how much would it cost to build on top of the highest mountain we have, just to create that slope that we need, that little difference. But you can't really compete with Mother Nature there.
Yeah, they need to annex Lake Placid is the only way that you can do it.
But that will never happen.
Yeah, so that's exactly it. But yeah, that's the disadvantage you're at, and that's why we're in Beijing more than the recycled part. But if the recycled part of it does sort of lend a way forward, moving forward, then that's a great thing. And I think it will, because actually, when we talk about the next games that we'll cover, which will be, when will the next games be in Paris?
2024, that is Paris, I believe. I keep thinking it's LA. 2028 is LA, right?
It's LA 28.
Yeah,
both the Paris and the LA games are using a lot of existing facilities, particularly LA.
Which
LA,
makes sense, but even Paris, there's arenas in Paris. There's big freaking soccer you're gonna tell me you can't use the Stade de France or the Parc des Princes to do the athletics? Of course you can, and that's what actually makes sense. It doesn't have to be brand new all the time, right, Qatar?
Exactly, and what I'm particularly excited about, Kevin, is the next 3 Olympics will not be in the middle of the damn night for me.
Oh, I know, but not only that, and no offense to anybody in Asia, but it's been a lot of Asian games since 2008.
The back-to-back nature of it. Yeah,
we've been Beijing, and since then we had Sochi, Rio, and then Pyeongchang, and of course Beijing. So out of the last 7 games, there was 4 in Asia. So yeah,
the run has happened. Yeah, that's it can be a while. That's one of the reasons why, to go back to the 2030 real quickly, and maybe we'll move on after that. But you can have your thoughts on the but after the 2030, one of the reasons I think Canada can have it if they wanted is because the only other city that's indicated a desire is to go back to Japan, and you know what? I think even the IOC might at that point go, no, enough with the Asia.
We're good until 2040 is the next time you can, of course, maybe apply again. All right, let's dive into it. The Five Rings podcast has been going on since Sochi, and during the games we go daily with this format. We have different medals. We have the normal medal that you can find. And, of course, we can describe them as being a bronze for our third most impressive performance of the day or moment. It could be person, an actual medal, a performance, or even something that is worthy of a third spot mention. Silver is the second. Gold is our favorite or greatest performance of the day. But we also have a couple of different, and this is not copyrighted, but it's our version of it. We have the wood medal, which is either a bad performance, a bad moment, something that we want to highlight for the wrong reasons. That's our wood medal. The best Canadian performance, our favorite Canadian performance, is, of course, named after maybe Canada's greatest contribution to the world, to the gastronomy world. It's the poutine medal. And of course, that is undisputedly the best meal ever made in the entire world. And on a poutine form, it's giving to the best Canadian moment of the day.
There you go. And as Kevin sort of said, well, a couple points of that before I jump into them. We are in Canada. I'm in Toronto. Kevin is in Montreal, as I said earlier. So we always are going to have a Canadian eye on this. But like our soccer show, which is, we jokingly call it the world of football from a soccer perspective, this is the world of the Olympics from a Canadian perspective. So there's always going to be a little bit of Canada that sneaks in and seeps into everything. But I do endeavor very much every day to make sure that the international story is getting told as best as we can.
And a little thing too. I am monitoring NBC. I will keep an eye on different, I guess, point of view of the Beijing Olympic Games.
Yeah, exactly. So these won't all be Canadian moments. In fact, the pre-game days, so day -2 and day -1, if you prefer, the medals for them do include aren't entirely Canadian, although there are 2 Canadians in the ones that I have created. So there you go.
I'm gonna start because I only have one for this pre-game. I haven't been as involved in watching the pre-OC competition. Should we call them then? And, if you're going to have them before, it's unfortunate. They go a bit unnoticed. But to me, and it's unfortunate because I kind of missed competitions that I love, which is ski jumping. My favorite thing to watch, ski jumping. Don't ask me why. Is it the thought of seeing them crash? Is it the thought of thinking of them flying? I don't know. Maybe somewhere in between. But I do love me some ski jumping. To me, my big wood medal, and you know where I'm going with this, the entire internet is going the same way as I am. Where is my cauldron? You're giving me a little lighter when I'm expecting a bonfire. It isn't that hard. Just create something that looks some sort of a shape of a bowl. Listen, Vancouver, if you ever do the games again, just go with a bowl. It doesn't matter what shape or size, but make it bowl-like and just set the damn thing on fire. It ain't that hard, Duane.
Well, no, and also, if you've listened to us for a long time, you know that I believe that Canadians have traditionally been the worst at lighting the cauldron because they always try and get too cute. You know, in Montreal, they had it as a francophone and an anglophone. Then they were the youthful people of the future. And then in Calgary, it was like it was a girl, like a 14-year-old girl who was a figure skater locally. And she was the future hope of Canadians athletes. And neither of them, of course, have done anything athletic after that. Although I'm sure I wish the young lady well. She'd be about 50 now. So there you go. And what was it? Vancouver, of course, they had the 6 people. They couldn't have one person. God forbid Canada make a choice. And
Vancouver had
one going to pick up truck. Anyway.
Yeah, but let's not forget that one of the damn arms didn't even work.
Yeah, I know. It was a mess. It was an absolute disaster.
But this time in China, it's basically they just took the flame, the torch that everybody ran with it. I don't know if it's the same one Jackie Chan had the day before on the Great Mural of China, the Great Wall of China, because Jackie Chan visited the Great Wall of China with the Olympic torch, of course, because the famous Olympic athlete, Jackie Chan, right? Mm-hmm. He's very, very good in wushu. Is wushu in the Olympics? No, it's not.
I'm not sure, but yeah, they.
When there was a flame inside of a snowflake, that's your cauldron. No, it's. I'm still waiting for someone to be like, and we were joking. Here's the actual torch and cauldron.
Look, they didn't. Nothing, didn't work, and they didn't put anyone in a pickup truck. So we'll give them that, but they didn't light anything either. They actually did not light a cauldron. They put the torch in a frame that looked like a snowflake, and that's it. It was the least, I was disappointed. It's one of my favorite things ever. It's like, it's something that every 2 years, it's going to be, a bit longer now because of the pandemic, but that I got to see, and it was a big moment because I'm an Olympic guy. But yeah, they took that away from me.
I was going to say that. I was literally going to say they took it away from us, Duane. They took that moment of seeing something lit on fire away from us. And I don't think it's I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's a big FU to the rest of the world. Be like, yeah, here you go. Welcome to our Olympic Games.
Because you know what, the Olympics don't start when the president or the prime minister or the queen or the king or the
Mr. Bean,
whatever supreme being says I declare the games open.
Dear leader.
No, they start when the flame goes up. We didn't get to see that. So at any rate, but I'll get over it because it's about the athletes, not about this ultimately. And the ceremony gets forgotten pretty quick unless it's London. I love the London Games. I've rewatched that one twice.
Yeah, I still don't know if I like the closing ceremonies better than the opening ceremonies.
Yeah,
because how can you beat the Spice Girls?
Well, precisely. It's the only closing ceremonies I've watched.
It's the only one that I would still watch. Like if it goes back on TV, I would be like, you know what, dear partner, I'm going to be busy for an hour.
Yeah.
All right. Another. Go ahead.
I was going to say, look, it was a mess. They did what they did. It's done now. We move forward from it. You kind of I'm going to give them credit for scaling down a little bit. You have to.
Oh, you have to. Nobody. And of course, the political tensions also could use for subdue of an opening ceremony. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but you could have had lit a cauldron. That would not have been too hard. At any rate, there we go. That's
even a better thought for the music, because you know what it feels like? It feels like they're like, okay, we got 25 minutes of music to fill in the stadium, or an hour of music to fill in the stadium. Let's Google classical music pieces, and the top 6, we'll just play them on a loop. That's what it felt like, because you had the Nutcracker and a couple of the most famous Western classical music pieces, and kind of we're just gonna play those just over the PA system, and that's gonna be the music aspect of our opening ceremony.
Yeah, there wasn't anyone singing. There was no performances at all in it. It was very, very low key. And one of the I do typically. The artsy-fartsy stuff, for lack of a better way to put it, is not really my cup of tea, but I usually get into it because it's the Olympics and I've been waiting for a while for it. But what I really love and what I really enjoy about an opening ceremony is the musical performances generally, because they're usually a local talent. they're generally quite beautifully, done. Katie Lang singing Hallelujah in Vancouver still gives me goosebumps when you hear that. It's one of the most beautiful versions of a very famous song. That's a great thing. And Katie Lang, again, is an artist that's known, but not, I think, massively known around the world. So it's kind of an example of the type of people that they put in there and exposed to a greater audience. And that was missing in this particular ceremony. But let's move on from it. I'll go to my wood medal, Kevin, and it's going to only be peripherally related to the opening ceremonies because, and I'm only going to say the name once. I'm going to endeavor to only say this name once during this entire campaign here.
All right, go ahead.
The country's name, that being Russia.
Oh.
Russia is not there. Their Olympic committee does have athletes representing their Olympic committee there. The Rock, as we're going to call them. The Rock is my general wood medal because how have we punished them for basically making a travesty of the Sochi Games?
Yeah, and then you know what they do. And, of course, I think you're going there. So I'll let you explain their flag bearer, and I'll let you explain why it's controversial.
Well, she's a drug cheat. That's why.
What got off on a technicality? So it's like you're literally putting someone that you know will kind of offend somebody else, but they can't really say anything because technically they haven't done anything wrong, and you're choosing them as your representative because you know it's going to irk the other people. That's what basically the message is. And we're going to get a lot more of that message because as much as you saying Russia is not there, the president of Russia, or is he the prime minister? Or is he both? I don't know at this point. I think he's pretty much both for life. But he is in China. And he's going to be there throughout the games. And he has a ton of meeting with the president of China. And he will appear somehow on the game broadcast at some point. And I thought that the country wasn't there. So the president of the country that's not there is actually there.
Yeah, look, it's a joke. And the fact that they named someone who so very controversially had her medal stripped away and then given back through the Court of Arbitration Sport through basically technicality is a slap in the face to the Olympic movement. It's a slap in the face to evidence. It's a slap in the face to any thinking person who says, it's gaslighting, to use the popular word of the times, as what Russia does when it comes to this. No, it doesn't matter what you see. What we say is right. And this is an example of it. And look, I love the Olympics. I defend the Olympics to people all the time. I was defending the Olympics to people this morning on my text messages with friends from high school that I still take part in. They're telling me how much they hate them and how they don't watch them anymore. And I have to be the one that comes in all the time and defend it. But then stuff like this happens, and how do you defend it?
You don't. And you don't have. We don't have to. That's the thing. We don't have to defend it. Something's happened, and I'm like, you know what? You're on your own with that one. You defend yourself, and I'll be like, you know what? I'm not involved here. If I was American, I'm pleading the fifth on this one.
Look.
Well, no, I'm against it, basically.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, I was just going to say, just to summarize my thing, like the fact that I'm not opposed to athletes that can prove that they're clean, that are from Russia being at the Olympics, but what they've done with this ROC, it's just a joke now. Like, even on the commentaries, like, the hockey ones are the worst. They always say Russia. They never say ROC. They sometimes remember in the individual sports, but it's like hit and miss because everyone knows where they're from.
I know. And they're not supposed to wear the colors in the way that the flag is. Sure. Yeah. That's respected.
Yeah. No, I watched their hockey team, the women's hockey team, play a little bit last, and it's clearly a Russian uniform. It's just got the Olympic Committee symbol on it. Not even. Exactly. I don't know. They should have been under the Olympic flag.
They should wear just pure yellow. It's like something totally foreign to what their country's colors are. Just like, okay, so you're banned and here's your uniform. It's all yellow and it has a big black square. So that's make it orange. Make it look like a prison, like a prison inmate kind of attire, accoutrement. And then you would maybe... Even then, there's no answers here. It's just there's no positives in this thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I don't know when it ends. Like, at some point, the absurdity, you might as well just let them be Russia at that point, right? Like,
exactly.
What's the point?
But in the history books, let's just make sure that it's actually documented, though, what happened. That's really what we want to know, is that over the years, we don't be like, oh yeah, Sochi, we're great. Nothing really happened. No, there was the biggest cover-up in a doping exercise. It's not even an exercise. State-sponsored doping mechanism, I guess, ever. So that's been documented. So we just want to make sure that they keep being documented. All right. Positive time. Let's move to the bronze medal.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Just quickly, as this final thought on that, I want to point out, if you go back and listen to our archives of the Sochi, one of our wood medals during that time was us saying there hasn't been any positive drug tests. That's weird. So yeah, it was pretty obvious even when it was happening.
And then you watch Icarus and you're like, holy crap, there's actually was trapdoors and stuff.
Yeah, the poutine. We're doing poutine now, I guess.
Well, I queued up for the bronze, but if you want to do poutine, go ahead. Poutine.
Yeah. Sort of. Sure, let's do poutine. My poutine medal is going to be a person Kevin and I were talking about off air, and who's a very famous person here in Canada, maybe not so much in the rest of the world, and had a very poor game in Pyeongchang. That's Rachel Hallman, who is part of the Canada doubles curling team right now, which is 3-1. After they lost to the world champions from Great Britain in the first game and won 3 games straight, and are looking very, very good to defend the gold medal right now if they can keep rolling as they were. And Rachel Hallman in particular, I wanted to put out John Morris as her partner, who's a 2-time gold medalist. But she really, really has a reputation. She has a lot of reputations, first off. She's not necessarily viewed as positively as maybe is fair, but nonetheless, that's out there. But the other reputation, more to the point of this, is that she's a bit of a choker, a bit of an over-trier. If you're familiar with the sports psychology term, the inverted U, where if you try, your effort is so high and you go so much that it starts to drop performance. It's the inverted U theory. She's been a poster child for that for a long time, and she was at Pyeongchang, where she completely, for Canada, they didn't medal, and that's not expected for Canadian and curling. Like they medal, like gold medal or bust is where they at. If they don't even hit the podium, like something went wrong, and something went wrong for Rachel Hallman and her team in Pyeongchang. But she's playing very, very well, and in fact, arguably is carrying John Morris a little bit in terms of the shot making in the first couple of games at least. So I wanted to highlight her. I'm sure in the next few days I may have an opportunity to talk about that team again, because it is a big part of my focal point of the Olympics is watching the curling competition. It is daily, and it is something I enjoy anyway. I watch outside of Olympics. So I will highlight her as my poutine medal of the day, Kevin.
All right, Rachel Hallman with the first poutine medal of the 2022 Beijing Olympic Games for the Five Rings podcast, which brings us to a bronze medal for, I guess, the pre-Olympic ceremony.
Yeah, the bronze medal I'm going to give to a hockey game that I watched last night. And look, I'm critical of the IIHF, the International Ice Hockey Federation, a lot. Because I don't think they do a lot to grow the game outside of their little fiefdoms in Saskatchewan and so forth, which, Switzerland and Saskatchewan are basically where they're kings, right? And they kind of are comfortable in their scenarios, and they don't really try and expand their wings too much. And that frustrates me as a lifelong hockey player, referee, and fan. But I think that the women's game on the women's side, the countries that have decided to start women's programs are not really expanding at the speed that I'd like them to, but the athletes that have taken to the game are truly showing a passion for it that is allowing the games between the non-big three and the women's side to start to look better and to start to have a passion to them, have a joy to them that's kind of really nice to watch. They're not going to medal, these countries. They're not close to the top 3 teams. In fact, the gap might be getting bigger if that's possible, because there's so much money going into the game in Canada and the United States that they're just getting better and better to the point that there's not a realistic pathway for the rest of the world to ever catch up. But nonetheless, what I wanted to point out was a game between Denmark and China, 2 first-time appearances in the first-time teams in the Olympics. They played one hell of a game last night that had me glued to it. There was Canadian athletes on my other 2 screens, and I couldn't take my eyes away from Denmark-China hockey. And that tells you something about how fun that game was, how passionate that game was. And China ended up getting its first win in Olympic history, and Denmark scored its first goal in Olympic history. And all that was just good. And that's what you want to see from an Olympic Games. You weren't thinking about politics. You weren't thinking about The Rock. You weren't thinking about, and not the one that you can smell what's cooking. You know what I'm talking about here.
It's too bad I don't have my board queued up, because I would have dropped some. If you smell
pretty impressed that I pulled that. I'm not the wrestling guy here. Anyway, but nonetheless, it was a great game. And look, I would actually recommend that if you're a hockey fan to not watch Canada or the United States until they play each other. Watch the other teams play each other because they're more competitive. They're better games. There's a lot of passionate. Canada-U.S. would be a great game when they play, but watching Canada beat Switzerland 12-1 on game for opening night was not that compelling at all.
Yeah, that's kind of understandable. Like, okay, it's not like, are they going to win? It's by how much are they going to win? It's not even that. It's, are they going to cover the spread at this point? It's more like, by how much?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, the spread was 5.5 if you're into that. But anyway, and they covered it, and they'll probably cover it tonight against Finland, who was okay. Finland's the clear third in this, although there have been a couple other bronze medalists. There's been a couple of Sweden won the silver medal once. If you don't know, it was a complete fluke that they beat the Americans in the semifinal. And at a world championship level, Finland won a silver medal once by upsetting Canada. But in the entire history, at even the world level or Olympic level, there's only ever been Canada versus U.S. other than 2 times has happened. So that tells you all you really need to know about this competition. You can't even get odds on the Canada, the United States medaling. Like it's you can't bet on it, right? That they're not going to take your money because it'd be impossible for them to get any value from it.
Exactly. Like, okay, you're going to have to lay $2,000 to win $1. Yeah,
that's where we're at with that. So look, and then when they play, it is a great game. There is no doubt. It is, and it will be. I think it's in a couple days from now. It might even. I think Saturday actually when they play for the first time in the group stage. And they've set up the tournament on the women's side quickly. If you don't know this, and this might confuse a lot of people, it's the only Olympic event that does this. There's Pool A is the top seeds. Pool B is the lower seeds. Everyone from Pool A plays each other in kind of friendlies, exhibitions, until, to use the hockey term, exhibition games, until then the other group pool plays each other, and the top 2 advance to join them in the knockout round, and then the real games start from there. So that just reflects how one-sided the competition is in terms of the top places. But as I say, you can get value, you can get enjoyment out of watching the rest of the games, and I actually recommend that you do that. They're far more compelling than watching the top teams until the top teams play. But when the top teams play, it will be fun.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Watch that.
Except maybe the U.S. best player is injured for the entire tournament, so that's kind of a bummer for the U.S. women's hockey team. And let's go with the silver medal for our first show of Beijing 2022.
I mentioned it already, but I'll repeat it now, and it's just the simple fact that they're reusing venues. The Olympics are too bloated, and in the past, the way that they've dealt with that is by cutting sports out. And I don't necessarily like that. I'd rather them find ways to save money and to save or make it more accessible and easier to host than eliminating Olympic dreams for people. That's not the approach. Like, don't take softball out of the games. Make it so that you can afford softball in the games. And the winter side is, I don't know why you used to win summer sport there, but nonetheless, the point remains. So the fact that they are using these venues again that used in 2008, to me, is a great sign that the Olympic movement's finally trying to learn this and might not all need the bells and whistles anymore. Although I'm sure that if you go to the hotel rooms, they're still getting bells and whistles.
Well, yeah, but a coat of paint goes a long way. Like, you don't need to build a new stadium or build a new ramp or to build a new ski venue or to build whatever new. You just need to maybe update what you have just so that it has the technology needed for broadcast. You make sure that it's safe. And, I'm okay living with something that it's not perfect. Something has its quirk. And you know what we love about different venues and different sports in like baseball all over the place is that everyone is kind of unique and that is kind of fun. And that was something that I used to love about Olympic is it used to look very different. Now it all looks like it's so big, so thing. But I kind of like the shots that we saw of you see the ice cube, I guess now, and then you see the bird's nest, and you see the other venue that's used that was transformed, and it's the oval ice rink, I believe. So you see a few different things that are still used now that were used in 2008 and that are updated with the new lighting because they were lit in 2008, but it was very different than lighting today. And that is kind of interesting. And you saw the curling venue, which is the ice cube, right? And you saw them lit up with all the names, but also they made a curling top, and you saw like animations on top. So that's kind of what they need to do. You update it to today's standards, but doesn't have to be above and beyond everything else, and doesn't have to be bankrupting the IOC, your city, and your people for the next decade. We're past that.
Yeah, no, it should be, your city should aspire to host these things. Like the city I'm in has been for the Summer Games twice and has not been successful in either attempt, but did have the opportunity to host the Pan Am Games in 2015 during the run of this show, actually. And the value of that game, so much as the locals complained about it, because locals complain about everything in this city, but nonetheless, I don't think that's unique to this city either. People are NIMBYs all over the world. However, the value it brought was undeniable in terms of transit infrastructure improvements, in terms of sport infrastructure improvements. There's a Olympic swimming pool here, which is literally bearing Olympic medals by now. And, we saw it in the cycling velodrome as well.
Exactly. The Milton Velodrome may be the biggest contributor from 2015 to medals from Canada from the last Olympic we covered last year.
Yeah, well, yeah, that and the pool, which there wasn't an Olympic-sized pool in Toronto before that. So now there was one at UT, but it was only used by the UT students. So it's the first public Olympic-sized pool in the city of 6 million. So that tells you what we needed. Anyway, to not get into that topic, which if you want to listen to a lot of us talk about it, you can go back to our archives and hear tons of conversations about that, soft benefits and hard benefits and all that sort of good stuff. But I think that it's a good sign to the Olympic movement that they've gone back to a city again. I think that maybe, I'm always open to new cities coming into the Olympic family, but realistically, it's probably time that we start to heavily recycle some teams and quicker. And that's the other part of it too. Like, we were in Beijing within memory. The athletes that competed in Beijing are on TV now and still look like they can compete. Like, they don't have gray hair. So it's something that I think is needs to happen moving forward again. And hopefully we see it happen that way. So that's my silver medal for my pre-Olympic competitions. And that's the other thing quickly about it, as just a general thought. That's not an athlete. And you'll hear that occasionally. Our medals aren't necessarily athletes or performances. They can be ideas too. And this is a first example of that.
It could basically be whatever we want.
Yeah. It's our show.
Exactly. We don't have to label it. The label is the name itself, which means it's time for the pinnacle of the show. It is time to talk about the gold medal of, I guess, day one of the Five Rings podcast.
Yeah, he might get another repeat on the charts tomorrow. As much as I say that the medals don't have to be people or performances, they can be ideas. The gold medal usually is a performance because, higher, faster, stronger, right? That's what it's about. And I'm going to give the best performance I saw pre-Olympics was a Canadian by chance. It would have been another. If it wasn't a Canadian, it would have been someone else, but it was. And that's Mr. Kingsbury, the world champion in the moguls, defending gold medalist, defending twice in a row. This would be his third straight Olympics with a medal. He was completely dominant, 5 points ahead of the rest of the field. The only competitor in the qualifying to go over 80 points. Looks like, I don't know, lock in any skiing event. You never want to say a lock because you can blow a ski out and be done, but
blow
he's a ski, close to a lock as you can get.
You can also blow a knee, and we can ask Philippe Marquis how that feels. Go back to Pyeongchang.
Mikhail Kingsbury is he's a brilliant athlete.
He's the best ever. He's the best ever to do that sport. So it's hands down. And we're talking about moguls here. Talking about freestyle skiing moguls for Michael Kingsbury. And in his life, he has gone down hills that are literally the same as that one. The type of moguls that are built for the Winter Games are basically based and conceptualized off of moguls in Mont Saint-Sauveur in the Laurentians, where he trained his entire life. He basically went down that hill millions of times. He's closing his eyes and does his training run, and it's literally the same track, the same type of snow, the same weather, the same condition that he's used to.
Yeah, well, yeah, precisely. And look, for most Canadians will be used to the conditions that he's skiing in, because the majority of Canadians live closer to mountains, hills in some cases that have those conditions. And that's one of the great things about the freestyle disciplines is you don't necessarily have to live within a drive of a mountain to be able to it. You can have a great moguls hill in Collingswood or here in Ontario, Blue Mountain, which is it's an escarpment, not a mountain, right? Like it's
It takes you 35 seconds to go down when you just go downhill to go the entire thing, but that's enough for aerial moguls, freestyles, of course.
Yeah, and it's a very technical sport. And what makes Kingsbury so good is that technical side. It's a spectacular sport to watch. It's one of my favorite sports to watch ever, and that's partly because of the success Canada's had in it. It's probably our most successful individuals. It might be our most successful individual event in all of the Olympics, not just the Winter Games. I'd have to think about that a bit more, but I can't think of another one off the top of my head.
Right.
We've had so much consistent success in.
Especially women's, too, because you can go from Jean-Luc Brassard, who was maybe... Even then, there was some before him, but Jean-Luc Brassard was maybe the best one in the early 90s, all the way to Jennifer Hallman, the women, and then we go back to Alexandre Bilodeau, to Michael Kingsbury. So we're talking about a domination that is 3 decades in the making now.
Yeah. Even into the 80s, they were competitive in it. They didn't necessarily have gold medals in the 80s, but they were competing in it. And then into the 90s, then they started to win this discipline. So the moguls are absolutely, and they start the every games too. They are the first one out down the hill, and it kind of, there's something about the first events, and the Olympic program is generally the same Olympics to Olympics, and there's just something nice about it. But it's a fun competition to watch. But sorry, where I was going, I was trying to get my thought process back in line here, Kevin. Yes, what the point I wanted to make with it is it can be spectacular to watch, and he is spectacular with the jumps. But where he really sets himself apart is his turns, and that is 60% of the scoring within the moguls. You don't have to be an expert to see the difference. When he goes down the hill, it is night and day better than the rest. He is like a robot cutting through that mountain. And if you've ever been on a ski hill on a moguls run, they're terrifying. Like, they're terrifying.
It's way more steep. The camera does not do it justice, and the hills are way bigger than you think. And you're wondering, how am I not going to break my rotula when I go down that hill?
Yeah, what they do is not, well, any Olympian, what they do is not. But
you're
particular,
right.
Yeah, in this particular case, like when I went down a moguls hill, I've gone down a few times. I'm not a bad skier. I call myself like a mid to high intermediate level skier. But I have to go down the hill like left to right to left to right, not straight down the damn hill.
Never mind jumping, eh? Never mind taking the actual jumps, because those are not for normal people.
Yeah, he's just very good, and that's why he's a gold medal for the pre-Olympic, and you can watch him compete for gold probably about 12 hours from now. So we might be talking about him again tomorrow.
Exactly. Let's set the table for tomorrow, which will be February 5th, 2022. Tomorrow's show, we'll be talking about alpine skiing already. Biathlon competition and medals will be given out. In biathlon, we'll have medals in cross-country skiing. Curling will continue. There's going to be curling every single day for the next 2 weeks. Duane is very happy about that. Freestyle skiing, ice hockey on the women's side, luge. Luge will start also, will continue on February 5th. Short track speed skating with some medals given out there too. Medals in ski jumping, so don't look for me. I'll be watching ski jumping. A good movie I actually love, and that's my movie recommendation for today. It's not the way it happened in real life, and the Eddie the Eagle story is a great story, but the movie is also pretty good with Hugh Jackman. So you know what? You can watch that movie if you're bored until the competition starts tonight. Snowboard, and also some medals in the long track or the actual regular track speed skating.
Yeah, speed skating is another one of the sport that I always associate with watching a Winter Games. So once I see someone go down a mogul's hill, and once I see a Dutch person in that orange suit skating really fast in a circle, I know it's a Winter Games.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Like, is it the Winter Games yet? I don't know. Did the Netherlands win a medal in speed skating? Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess the Olympics have started, which will be back tomorrow with a brand new show. Thank you for subscribing to this Olympic podcast. We've been going strong since 2014, and we are the longest running Olympic podcast on the planet. Thanks for subscribing to this podcast feed. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute. Our account, this Firing Podcast, is available at Firings Podcast, and myself at Kevin Laramee. We'll be back with a brand new show tomorrow, and as always, until then, have a great Olympics.